Hey, how's it going?
Hey Ben, it's good, man. How are you doing?
I am doing extraordinary. Another amazing day to do amazing things with amazing people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, happy Friday. I love your PFP, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Got to keep those laser eyes focused on the goal.
We definitely need laser eyes and laser focus. Given the state of the market, state of macro, it's kind of it's brutal out there. But I'm sure a lot of us have been through it before, and a lot of great things to build, as they say, during these crypto winters.
I definitely agree with you there, and I maybe a little bit crazy, but I actually kind of get excited in these moments in time because I think this is really where the quality bubbles to the surface, and we can all really focus in on what's important and what's truly fundamentally great, and move forward as an entire industry in these times.
Could not agree more, and it's definitely the times when you identify those groups and companies and projects with genuine intent versus those just looking to latch on to what they see as a short-term opportunity or kind of quick money, if you will. I know we'll get into all of this, but I've been around in the space for a long time, and I've seen a lot of different teams come and go. But you're 100% correct. This is a great time to build and a great time to identify those with conviction.
I love it. So it's 3 o'clock, uh, 3 o'clock CST, top of the hour here. So let's go ahead and get started. We got some listeners piling in. We have the recording started. Everything seems like we are good to go. Michael, I just want to thank you again so much for coming on and doing this AMA here. I think it's going to be extraordinary to get to hear from you. It's not every day that we get to hear from yourself. So, just folks, if you're not familiar with Michael, um, really broke into the scene, digital asset holdings, November of 2013, moved into multi-chain ventures of August of 2016, um, joined an advisory board, block drop, 2018, and then co-founded both Star Atlas and ATMA Inc. In August of 2020. Um, Michael, I hope I didn't leave anything out there. Would love to just hear a bit more about what really inspired you to get into this space, and get a little bit of background on you.
No, for sure. I mean, so that was the quick and dirty from my LinkedIn. I'm sure, in essence, I have a traditional finance background. So I hold a CFA charter, which is a chartered financial analyst, and previously worked in the field of portfolio management and investment analysis and securities analysis. I got introduced to crypto in 2013. This is from a long time a friend of mine who introduced me to script coin mining with GPUs. And if I were to take it a little bit further back, my high school days, my formative years, and many people have probably heard this, but my formative years, I grew up in a pretty nerdy computer group that we called the Lanarchists, and we spent our time local area networking computers together and just playing video games all weekend. And so I've grown up building all my own PCs and gaming. And when he described to me the process of setting up GPUs in milk crate computer rigs and mining cryptocurrencies with them, I was pretty fascinated. And so went out and bought a bunch of equipment and started building these rigs and participating in the industry at the time. And while that particular venture was not profitable, it was successful at captivating and capturing my attention about the potential of the technology. And so fast forward a couple of years, I made the decision to go full-time crypto in 2015. What you see as multi-chain ventures actually started as the Tokes platform in 2016, and the launch of that company was centered around the intersection of crypto and cannabis. We wanted to provide decentralized financial infrastructure to the legal cannabis industry. And really, it was through the development and growth of that company that I ultimately got connected with two of the three other co founders. And that's Danny Floyd and Jacob Floyd. Danny's our chief product officer, Jacob is our chief technology officer. Pablo Quiroga, I got connected to also through the cannabis industry in 2018, and he's our chief revenue officer and fourth co founder. Um, And I'm just incredibly grateful. We had some great successes across Tokes, which ultimately evolved into multi-chain ventures with a kind of a portfolio of different brands, if you will. Um, but it was, to our earlier point, as we were just chatting at the start of the call here, it's during these kind of bear markets, during down cycles, where some of the best opportunities actually lie. And this was the case in 2020. Things were down, the pandemic was upon us, and Jacob, Danny, and myself sat down and we started conceptualizing this idea of Star Atlas, and the rest is kind of history. And I'm sure we'll get into that over the course of the AMA today.
I love that. Now, you were there early on, and so you're a multi-cycler. You've seen what it looks like, and obviously you came in on the capital allocation side. You have a deep history in that, but it's a very different sort of experience, investing versus building out a full um, metaverse with a game and an open world, grand strategy. So, what was really the inspiration of moving, or maybe transcending the capital allocation space and moving into the gaming space? What was really the motivation for you for, and what was that moment, that pivotal moment that really it all clicked for you guys?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I guess I should kind of clarify. I have had an entrepreneurial spirit pretty much my whole life, and I think by and large entering into finance and establishing that career path certainly was a comfortable position to be in, but I don't know that well, I can tell you certainly it wasn't as rewarding and fulfilling as I would have wanted it to be. And I knew that I had a passion for creating things and building things, and just being in crypto and being around all the innovation and seeing the progress and growth of the industry just really inspired me to make that leap. Right, and it was 2015 that I made the first leap fully into the space, and it was certainly a big risk. And it doesn't seem like that long ago, 2015, 7 years ago, but um, the perception of crypto at the time was substantially different than it is today. And we're still nascent, but the maturity level is significantly higher, right? And we're seeing that with institutional adoption and support and legitimate players and real successful projects and companies coming out of this now. So that was kind of, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I've been involved in launching businesses in the past, and I saw this as a great opportunity to do it again in a space that was bleeding edge. Now, getting into gaming, as I mentioned, I have kind of just grew up as a gamer. That doesn't speak to the ability to create a AAA quality game, but fortunately, I have some great people on my team, really amazing people across the company. But on the co-founder side, Danny, it has 20 years in AAA game development experience, and Jacob and Danny collectively worked on a mobile game development studio at one point in their history and had some successful launches there as well. And of course, we worked well together through the history of Tokes. Um, but what we kind of identified in early 2020 was the trend around things like DeFi and NFTs getting popularized, and also a very very early stage of crypto or blockchain gaming, right? GameFi, if you will. Although, and this isn't necessarily a criticism, but what we noticed is that the fidelity tended to be quite low, that the mechanics were pretty simplified, a lot of turn-based games or card style games. And so our passion was in gaming, and that's where we identified the opportunity was bringing something that's best in class, that's highest quality, that the traditional gamer, the mainstream gamer would be interested in engaging in, and incorporating and building as a technology layer and part of the stack a number of different blockchain mechanics. So not only the NFT issuance and not only the crypto native economy, supporting both in-game currency and the governance token, but actually taking that even a step further and extracting and abstracting much of the game logic outside of the engine actually, and developing that to live on the blockchain. And I could probably go on about this forever, but what I will simply say here, and I'm happy to elaborate on if interested, but um, taking logic and building it on the blockchain as essentially your backend for a video game immediately opens the door for external development, for co-development, and for third-party creation. This is kind of like open sourcing a game for modding, for example, creating extensions of the gaming product itself or enhancements or new experiences. But we do so in a completely permissionless and trustless fashion, right? It's equivalent to the creation of a layer one protocol itself, like what Solana did, which we build on Solana, not necessarily Bitcoin. You don't see this on Bitcoin, although I'm a huge advocate for Bitcoin. But like Ethereum kicked off is the idea that if we build a set of tools and primitives for creators, they will leverage those tools and build great products, right? And that is why we see explosion in growth and innovation in protocols like Ethereum and like Solana, because the base tooling exists and the functionality exists and it's all interconnected. Well, what we can do with a gaming product is build essentially that exact same dynamic, except now instead of interacting with, financial transactionary software, you're actually interacting directly with a game economy and game environment. So let me pause there because that was kind of a lot.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most underrated and misunderstood opportunities within blockchain gaming, Web3 gaming, whatever we want to call it, the metaverse, is this idea of it really is a community effort where there's so much opportunity. It's almost hard to fully define that. So maybe let's do it in a way where we're drawing a parallel from what is a little bit more uh, understood already. So let's use Solana as a platform where we can understand that as a blockchain. We can understand developers building on top of that and other applications or protocols being built on top of that. Let's draw the parallel where if Star Atlas is the Solana in this parallel, what would be the equivalent of the different dApps or the different things that can be built on top of it. Let's just try to understand it from building block and then what those can become perspective.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so again, great question, and a lot of the applications are perhaps comparable to those that you might see developed out on, say, Solana on a blockchain, right? On a layer one protocol, and the first example that I would provide is probably that of a lending protocol or a lending tool. Now, all of our NFT assets live natively on Solana. Obviously, they're fully integrated into the game. In fact, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but one of the big innovations that we'll be releasing soon was the creation of what we call the Foundation Kit, or it's a software development kit that is a native Solana integration into Unreal Engine. So you never need to leave the game environment to interact with your on-chain assets. And we'll be releasing that open source. But all of the assets naturally live in the game. Well, it's very reasonable that you as a owner of these assets will not have the capacity to play them with all of your free time, nor would you necessarily want to, right? But at the same time, there's an opportunity cost of those assets in that that they have, say, revenue potential in game. You can actually earn Atlas for playing. And so for you, you could either take the option of, playing when you have time and earning with the time spent, or you could lend those or loan those out to other players to utilize in the meantime. And what this effectively creates is a level of passive income, if you will, for the owner of that asset, in which, now somebody that doesn't actually own the ship has an opportunity to engage in the game and play. And there are many different models that could be deployed in terms of how you do that, whether it's like a flat fee rental, kind of like renting a U-Haul or a rental car, for example, or you could even do the revenue share model, wherein the owner of the asset gets a portion of any of the income earned, kind of like the scholarship model in Axie. So those are two options, but ultimately somebody gets to play the game that doesn't actually own one of these ships or crew members or mining facilities or land in the game, but and at the same time, the person that is the owner of the asset gets to maximize its utility on an individual basis. So that's one thing. But I see a lot of efficiency also being created here around certain gameplay mechanics. So, for example, things like resource management in the game is also lives entirely on chain, as does land ownership and extraction of resources. Things like moving around the game, for example, there is a blockchain implementation for tracking the location of an asset throughout the game environment. Well, it's very possible that somebody goes out to create tooling that in maybe some way automates certain processes. If for anyone out there that's played StarCraft, like you'll remember, taking your uh, oh man, the SCVs and like mining resources back at your base while you're out exploring the map, right? You're exploring the map and killing enemies. Um, well, that process doesn't necessarily exist intrinsically in Star Atlas today, although I mean it's a function that we could introduce. But it's also possible now for somebody to actually create that process externally and then facilitate that type of action for user assets. And then in addition to that, I would just say it gets incredibly vast in that somebody could actually create an um, uh, uh, complete external experiences or environments. An external planet, for example. This is one of the areas that I'm really interested in. Is this idea of kind of miniverse, tangential miniverses to be created associated with Star Atlas, wherein we can actually integrate, for example, link outs to external game environments, which might just be something like a planet that ultimately lives inside of the Star Atlas universe. And on that planet, the dynamics, the mechanics, the physics, even maybe the assets that exist and are supported there are completely unique or different from those that are intrinsic to the broader Star Atlas universe. And the creator of that would either do so out of passion or would do so because they find their own way to, say, monetize that as a product or service, right? But think about maybe creating some first person shooter environment on a planet, and when you fly your ship there and land on that planet, you've now entered into an entirely new game and kind of a game environment, but it's essentially seamlessly connected to the Star Atlas universe, whether that be through our game client or the game environment itself. I'll give maybe one additional example here just to solidify this and kind of as a proof of concept. And we have a really amazing community, and I see a bunch of guild members out there. We call them decentralized autonomous corporations, but it's effectively the guild structure in Star Atlas. And many of them have created fantastic content for us. But I often reference something called the Pit Stop tool, which was created by a guild called the Club. And the first gaming application that we launched in December of last year was called Faction Fleet. And it was a way for you to effectively participate in the early stage economy by loaning any of the ship NFTs that you owned out to the faction. And as long as you as a player are maintaining and keeping an inventory of 4 different resources, then you are earning Atlas for lending your ships out. This is kind of like an internal non-peer-to-peer lending protocol that we built. Well, uh, to manage those ships, you have to go in some cases daily, you have to go in and resupply, say, fuel or food or toolkits or ammunition to your ships so that you can continue fighting the good fight out there for your faction. Well, the club built a tool that interacts with our on-chain programs, and instead of having to go through each one of your ships, or rather ship classes, and restocking all of those in a single click, you could not only purchase all of the tools that all of the resources that you needed, but also immediately resupply all of your ships. So it was a way to create efficiency, and I think a bunch of people are using that. And just full disclaimer here, this is not a I don't know if the program was audited, so certainly do your own research on whether or not you want to interact with that tool. But what I'm getting at here is that this type of tooling only exists because we have on-chain programs. The club was able to go out and do that and build that functionality, never discussing it with us whatsoever, nor should they have to, and build new utility for players. So these things are only possible because we use the blockchain as effectively the back end to our game development.
Now, do you see this expanding into something like thinking back to the world of Warcraft 3 and all the different mods, and from there, different game types got spun up. How advanced do you foresee this being, or how much can you enable the community to create within Star Atlas? Like, are they going to be able to build their own custom logic and use, different game mechanics, or do you provide them a set of tools? Like, how do they actually go about creating, and what are the limits to what they can create? It makes sense to where there would be different worlds for different things. So maybe there's a paintball world or a space paintball world or whatever, where there's really fun gameplay and a lot of ways to engage with fellow folks within the metaverse. But just kind of curious, like, where does that hit any sort of limits as far as software, hardware, on what's possible, and where is that right now?
So it might sound like kind of a non-answer, but I think in my personal opinion, it is virtually limitless in terms of opportunity. Um, Let me start by distinguishing maybe between what can exist, say, within Star Atlas and what can be created externally and yet leverage mechanics or assets or economy of Star Atlas. Now, internally, we're presently fairly protective over the idea of something like user generated content, for example, simply because we do hold ourselves to very high standards of development. This idea of AAA quality is actually quite challenging to build to. There's not many teams around the world that are capable of building the highest level of fidelity of assets, let alone all of the other kind of mechanics and functionality and story and lore and things that go into, the immersion that is AAA. And so we just want to ensure that in the short term, in the near term, and by near term, I mean anywhere from even 3 to 5 years, um, we kind of protect the integrity of the game environment. So that's not to imply we won't allow for things like UGC, which we envision as probably rolling out as, some type of character customization or personalization of, say, ship assets through skins or decals or naming or things of that nature. But things that won't jeopardize, say, the overall quality of a model or functionality or animation or VFX of an item in game. Now, thinking externally, there's absolutely nothing we can or would do to defend against somebody that wants to build a game environment that utilizes Star Atlas ships or characters or, to some extent, lore, naming, or IP. On the IP front, I should probably caveat and just say that we have a relatively flexible IP policy, although right now it's on a case by case basis. And we do have fantastic in-house GC. His name's Dan Park, and he's been working with teams out in the ecosystem to discuss opportunities with people to leverage some of the branding. But I guess the point is, if somebody wants to interact with one of our on-chain programs and somehow incorporate any of the assets from Star Atlas into their game environment, there's nothing we can do. These are decentralized systems, right? They're permissionless systems in their very nature, and so and further, I mean, we want to be supportive of that. Now, modding, I think, takes on a whole new meaning when you get into Web3, because in the conventional sense, modding was very much done as passion projects for the creators. The guys behind Counter-Strike, which I arguably, well, League of Legends and Counter-Strike are arguably the most successful mods of all time. It's like Counter-Strike is one that's kind of close to home for me. I still play it, and I started playing it as a mod for Half-Life in 1999. Obviously, that got spun out and is its own very successful gaming product now using Valve Engine, but nobody was paying them to create that, right? They were just building that for fun. Well, with Web3, though, the pathway kind of opens up to actual revenue streams or areas of monetization, and that could be through simply the integration of some type of transaction fee structure without needing to go out and sell a title, right? You create the game environment, and maybe transactions that take place that incorporate Star Atlas economy into their game environment delivers a method of income for the creator of that environment. So I think modding is huge, and really, if we look more to the future, while we are certainly heavily focused on gameplay development today, it is the centerpiece of Star Atlas as a metaverse, if you will. We're kind of a gaming first metaverse experience. But in the future, I think that the concept of the metaverse itself is really the next iteration of the internet, and what that implies is like virtually everything that we do online today, whether that be social or work or education or commerce or commerce in particular, I think is a category that's uh, widely uh, set to be displaced by the idea of the metaverse. But all of those things can be done in Star Atlas as well, and they likely will be done in Star Atlas. Gaming is one of the other activities you can participate in, but it's also just as likely that you're an individual looking to connect with other people socially, and you do so by customizing an avatar and going and running around in a space station. Um, but this idea of the metaverse and what's possible, and the next generation of the internet intrinsically implies that there is an opportunity for somebody to create an application that is associated with Star Atlas simply because they know that's where many users already exist. That's where people spend a lot of their time. So they have they are incentivized to build where people are present, right? It's kind of the way that cities have formed, and why why we have commercial centers and malls and things in society today is because like when there's a lot of people around, there's greater levels of efficiency. Obviously, that comes with some of its own downsides, but I digress. So again, that was another long answer. So let me maybe take a pause there.
I appreciate you going into detail here because that's what the people want to hear. So let's actually dive a bit deeper into this idea of the metaverse being the next iteration of technology and the internet, software, hardware. Obviously, we're going to see a lot bigger push into AR, VR, haptic technology. I know you've spoken about that briefly on other interviews, but maybe you could just give us kind of like a state of the technology that you're scoping out right now, as far as for the metaverse, and specifically Star Atlas. Like, where do you think we are, and what do you think is coming around the corner for what is commercially viable and what you would be comfortable implementing into such an already incredible project?
I think that maybe starting with AR, or excuse me, VR, I think they've that segment of the industry has made some pretty substantial progress. We have strong commercial products available today. With that said, I think it still has quite a long way to go until it's ready for, say, mass adoption. It's still kind of a niche product. I have a set of VR goggles, um, but the fidelity that you get through these isn't as high as it possibly could be. It's certainly not on par with what you get with a nice high-end on-screen display in, say, 4K or even 8K. Um, they're not terribly comfortable still, so I think minimizing the size and finding a way to make them more comfortable for longer term use is going to be helpful. AR, I think, is earlier stage than VR, although I think the application for AR is actually substantially larger than for that of VR, simply because you could use that in maybe similar to like a gaming environment or digital environment. But I think the idea of like an AR overlay to your everyday life could be quite cool. Thinking in terms of, like, say, Pokemon Go, except with AR goggles or AR glasses, and you're actually not looking at these characters on screen on your mobile device, but rather you're seeing them as if they were there in reality. I think that's incredibly cool, and in fact, one of the avenues that we've started to pursue, just in a very early stage of R&D, is a mobile division. So Automata is the studio that is the primary developer of Star Atlas, and so right now we're building several product lines, Marketplace being one of those. But really, the gaming environments include Unreal Engine. We have a web-based client that's in Play Canvas, so this is full 3D WebGL assets in browser. And then, as I said, we're starting to explore this concept of a mobile division and what we could do there. Specifically because I think of the physical applications that could be associated with Metaverse in the future. To me, it's very, very compelling. I think it's really cool, and maybe you disconnect from Star Atlas game client where you're flying a ship because you need to take a walk down to the store, and on the way you're killing hostile opponents with AR glasses on. So it kind of makes deeper immersion into the ecosystem, but also maybe just a little more fun on that path. And I think in some ways the idea of like move to earn, for example, is pretty interesting. I don't know if it makes a ton of sense commercially to compensate people for exercise, but I think if you incorporate that into a broader ecosystem, it might be commercially viable. But you mentioned haptic suits. So this is physical sensory feedback from a digital environment. I think really, really cool. Again, very early stage stuff there from what I've seen. And then the last thing that maybe you didn't mention that I think is also very interesting, specifically for mobile, again, is the idea of pixel streaming. So this is like a Stadia app where all of the video rendering is done in the cloud, and then it is streamed to a mobile device. So what you can actually accomplish there is getting the highest caliber quality of graphics, but delivered to a mobile device. Obviously, your phone is not running a 3080 in it, so you can't necessarily get 4K or even 1080 quality out of a mobile device, but if it were rendered on your phone, but you can do that remote and have it streamed to your phone. And now, I don't know, 6 billion people that have smartphones in the world, or maybe that's an exaggerated number, but the billions of people that have mobile devices but don't have access to any level of high quality computing are actually able to experience the same digital world of Star Atlas that the people with the gaming PCs are. So I think that's super cool. To the final point on your question of when are we comfortable with integrating these things, I would just say VR is a technology that we're interested in pursuing. We have quite a long path of development before we get to the point where we consider integrating VR. Now that could change, and it could be sooner, or it could change and we end up not ever building a VR experience in Star Atlas, which I think is unlikely, but possible. But simply because we're still in the process of creating so many of the underlying content delivery mechanisms and pipelines at Automata that adding VR to the mix, given the current state of that technology, doesn't make a lot of sense for us. Plus, we really need to build the game is kind of the core point here, the core gaming application that most people are attracted to, and then we look to enhance that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned mobile, and that's a very, very exciting concept. How far along are you on the mobile side, and is there going to be crossplay? Is it all going to be one seamless experience between all the different types of devices? How do you see that playing together?
Ben, it's yet again another great question. This is an area where I know I've teased this out a few times in the past on calls. The idea that we're kind of researching the opportunities there. I'm not ready to reveal just yet precisely what application we're looking at with mobile. So I can't share too much just yet. I would say anything to do with pixel streaming in the future to mobile device will be more reliant on us actually having the core gameplay functionality out in Unreal Engine first. So could be a couple years on that one. I should also maybe footnote this for anyone that is in the audience that's relatively new to Star Atlas or hasn't heard from me in the past, but our approach to development is one that is sort of co-creation, but also iterative from a release standpoint. The conventional model of game development is to wait until you have a fully polished product and start marketing a year in advance and release that product when it's fully interactive. Our approach is quite a bit different in that we essentially build components of the game, or modules, as we say, and we release that with the greatest frequency that we can, and with the intention of expanding on that and enhancing those experiences and keeping people engaged and interactive and providing feedback and offering their suggestions and listening to that interactive community component along the way. Um, but it's really a peek behind the curtains. I don't think that this has ever really been done before, where a global community has an opportunity to see the inner workings of a game development studio. It can be painful at times. I'll be perfectly honest, because it's kind of like the saying. What is the saying? Seeing how the sausage is made, right? So it might taste great, but you don't necessarily want to see the process. Some people really enjoy it. Some people don't understand it at all, and it certainly leaves us open to criticism when there's a misunderstanding about what it takes to get to the end product. And I'll just say, one additional thing, by the way, a quick mention here for there's a really great documentary on it's on Disney Plus, and it's called Light and Magic, and it's the story of the creation of industrial light and magic. George Lucas created this VFX studio to create all of the VFX for the original Star Wars. Nobody else was capable of doing it, and so he built a studio so that they could. And it was one of the things that contributed to the great success of Star Wars as a franchise. I only mention that because if you were to see, one of the things they talk about in there is, like, if you saw these early iterations of Star Wars, you would have been immediately turned off. And in fact, even people that were working directly on the production, these early iterations of the movie were you could say they were terrible. They said they were terrible, but it's because you get to the final product that's fully polished and has gone through a number of iterations that everyone's like, wow, this is actually really groundbreaking, amazing stuff. Well, so we're not doing that, right? We're actually saying, no, you're going to see every cut, every edit, every step along the way, and it might not look great on day one, but by the time we're finished, you have to have some confidence and some trust and be involved in this process, and you'll see what the end result is. So bit of a tangent, but just speaking to kind of the process of how we create and how we release in this iterative schedule. May have gotten myself completely off track there, Ben.
No, it's actually perfect because I wanted to dive into the part about at least my perceived notion of your thoughts on governance and community. I believe I heard in a previous interview where you were talking about the end goal being to really hand this off to a completely decentralized governance model so that it can last without you guys for hundreds of years, if not ever. So that's actually a perfect segue, because one of the biggest parts of what you're talking about of building in public is the interface with the community and getting their feedback, and then whatever you do with that feedback, that's a whole different story. So how do you think about this constant iteration of working with the community, building out in the open, from the perspective of eventually handing that off? Is that still the plan, and how does that all work together in your mind right now?
It is 100% the plan. In fact, just actually back in July. I was going to say last month, but we've just rolled over into September now. But just back in July, we kicked off one of our product launch events. We call them 426 Live, and actually Ronald there I see has 426 still in his, and you see it in my name as well, right? But 426 Live. So we had two product launches associated with the DAO, the Decentralized Autonomous Organization. The first of which was really just the foundational framework or platform that allows us to introduce features to the DAO. And the first of those was a Polis locker. This is the mechanism that we use to kind of secure, lock Polis for a fixed duration of time, and users could select anywhere from 2 years all the way up to 5 years. I will emphatically state here that we've had great participation already in the DAO with Polis locking, and over 50% of the individuals that have locked, or at least wallet addresses that have locked to the DAO, have done so at 5 years. So huge conviction from the community in their confidence in us to build, and thinking about the long term here. Coming in the future, quite soon actually, we'll be introducing another mechanism for Atlas. So Atlas is the in-game currency, Polis is the governance token. A new locker for Atlas, and then ultimately the next step of development, of release, although this is kind of already in the formation stages, is discourse, proposals, and voting, all on chain. So you can actually introduce new concepts to the community. Those can be approved, and then those can be voted on. Discourse is the channel for people to conversate about these proposals before they actually get introduced through the DAO framework. Now, like all things we do, we're pretty strategic and want to ensure that we have a sustainable path forward here. The idea of decentralized governance itself is obviously quite novel. It's obviously quite new. It's very much untested. So we have a lot of confidence in ourselves to bring a great product to market, and want to ensure that we have solid footing to do so unencumbered in the short term. Again, over several years, making sure that we bring out a fantastic product with a strong foundational structure, and then slowly over time things get more and more decentralized. Now we have a lot of ideas actually about how we can introduce greater levels of decentralization, and referring back to my earlier comments about the whole idea of on-chain logic in the game, that actually creates the first immediate opportunity to participate in a decentralized fashion within our ecosystem, whether it goes through the DAO or not. But the idea of the DAO is that it not only enables community-driven governance, but there's also a treasury that actually collects capital through in-game activity. You could think of this as being essentially analogous to a global or universal tax rate across the entire economy of the Star Atlas ecosystem, in which a portion of GDP is collected and transferred directly into the DAO. And what this implies is that the DAO now has treasury responsibility, but treasury rights, and it actually has a capital income stream that it can leverage to continuously grow. Right? It can decide how best to utilize those funds to either compensate other teams, other studios, other companies or projects that have an interest in building around our ecosystem, creating utility, creating features and functionality, whether that be through a hackathon or a game jam, or it could even leverage that itself for this was actually an idea that came up in our Discord channel, but the idea that the DAO could actually purchase ships and then use those ships in a lending program to create a free-to-play model. So the DAO actually purchases the items and then lends that out to new players, and maybe even markets to new players. And now those new players don't have to purchase anything to get into the game. So I think this is a really great concept, by the way, and one I'm very supportive of. But that's just one example of how the treasury could operate. So again, this is all highly experimental. It's actually quite difficult to get people to collaborate, even in I would say even in households, it's difficult to get people to agree upon things. More so when you enter into like a traditional corporate structure and getting people collectively at a company to agree on something, but then expand that out into self-interested, self-motivated individuals that don't know each other whatsoever, and hoping that they're going to be able to collectively and efficiently create a successful endeavor, is uncertain, right? And so, like, we're thinking through how can we actually implement some type of almost political structure or delegate structure that allows things to get done and allows things to get done effectively, and also prevents the exploitation of, say, the DAO treasury or the exploitation of the ecosystem overall. The last thing we want to see is, the creation of something that's amazing and transformative and impactful to people all over the world, and then, somebody identifies an opportunity to take advantage of that to their own personal interest and destroys all of it. So these are the things that we're considering, and in fact, in the next launch event, we'll actually be kicking off with, again, I referenced Dan Park, in-house GC. He's been leading up a lot of the efforts internally on what sustainable governance and path to decentralization looks like for us. And so he'll be providing a presentation that speaks to that and how we accomplish that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I want to ask one more question, and then I want to open it up, if you're comfortable with it, to get some questions from the audience here. I just really want to understand more about how you view, and scoping out just a little bit, how you view the metaverse as a whole. In your pin post, there was a sentiment of, the metaverse is really the end game of humanity, is in a good way. It's the culmination of tons of different pieces of technology, um, all coming together to create amazing things, amazing worlds, and creativity, and so many wonderful things. Do you still see the metaverse as really the future of the human race? Was that ever really your take, or was that just an awesome video you were pinning? So maybe you can just give your thoughts there, and then maybe you can help us understand and grasp a little bit more, where are we really right now? Because there's a lot of hype, a lot of people are excited. Of course, I'm one of them. I'm bought in as much as anybody. Yet there's still a lot of friction to get to where we'll all end up, wherever that may be. So just kind of curious on those 2 points there.
So the video in reference is Jason Silva, whom we did some work with early on in the launch of Star Atlas, specifically in a digital collectible campaign that we called Rebirth. These were posters and that kind of walked through some of the lore of Star Atlas, and they were all enhanced with augmented reality overlays, and then we had these audio soundscapes behind all of them. We wanted to create the initial sense of immersion into Star Atlas, and Jason's a well-known futurist, and so he has some amazing comments, and yes, he does speak to the concept of the metaverse. There's a lot of different ways that I could approach this question. I maybe want to reference a book that I'm quite fond of. It's called The Sovereign Individual, and I'll try to summarize very quickly here, but it kind of walks through progression of societal interactions. So starting with kind of the hunter-gatherer phase, and then rolling into agricultural, and then industrial, and more specifically what it gets into is the idea of the information age, which we've essentially emerged into now, the next generation, or the future of society that is ahead of us. But one of the things that it talks about is kind of the decline of the nation state. And I don't want to get too philosophical on this call here, but I mean the idea that we are essentially captive audience to governments today because of the country that we reside in. The idea that we are forced to pay taxes, whether or not those taxes are utilized efficiently or effectively to the purpose and to the benefit of the citizens of that country, is largely the competitive advantage that governments have is going away quite rapidly because of the evolution into a more digital state, right? Like this company, for example, Automata, we are a fully remote company. We operate across some 26 countries in virtually every single time zone. People that work for Automata do so wherever they want to, anywhere in the world, right? So Do you need to be a citizen of any particular geographic location or any particular country? Not necessarily. And as we kind of eliminate the concept of working locally within borders, it actually creates this opportunity for the individual to select that locale which actually provides them with the best benefit. And that might mean the lowest tax regime, or it might just mean the best public services that are actually available to that individual. So the idea of the metaverse, though, and I have like very broad goals for what we can accomplish within the Star Atlas economy, creates genuine, true labor markets and labor opportunities for people, and in fact, play to earn in many ways demonstrated this very opportunity set. I oftentimes reference Axie Infinity simply because during the pandemic was when it kind of came rose to a very strong position, uh, and it was kind of through Yield Guild games and through the scholarship model, and with mass adoption across the Philippines, where people were able to identify that, yes, I'm kind of unemployed working locally, but I can actually engage in this video game and create uh, um, um, financial opportunity for myself. Right now, I think Axie could be criticized for their economic model in terms of not necessarily being sustainable, and it's one of the reasons why we have a very strong internal economics team that thinks about things like game economy and token economy, but also the idea of this future metaverse economy. But if you're able to create an environment wherein labor markets exist and in fact they are efficient, then people are no longer subjected to call it economic or governmental regimes just based on where they reside. Right? You can actually identify work opportunities outside of your geographic location. So I think that's extremely empowering to people all over the world, and creates kind of a greater balance and distribution of wealth to those individuals that are actually performing functions that are in demand. Because of this, this is why I think that the metaverse itself is kind of the not only the next generation of the internet, but it's kind of the next generation of a globally connected economy, right? It's pretty wild to think that not only can you be working from anywhere and creating services and creating products and uh, um, interacting with things like cryptocurrency, but finding ways to efficiently benefit from that. So yeah, I think it's really powerful. Now, in terms of like where are we? Taking the technology approach, we're still obviously quite early. Although utilizing game engines like Unreal Engine is a massive leap forward in terms of immersiveness of these digital worlds. Nanite and Lumen and Metasounds. These create cinematic quality and level environments for people to interact within. We talked a little bit about AR and VR today already, and that's kind of an extension of it. What I don't want to see, and I don't think anybody really supports, is like rebuilding the Matrix, where you're you're like living in these digital worlds exclusively, and that's again why I think that AR and say mobile are actually pretty important overall to the long term success of this, because we want people to get outside and be physical as well, and not be plugged in all the time. So it's kind of like connecting all of these things, and then maybe the last comment I'll make on this, so that we do have a little time for questions, is the idea around interoperability. I think without question, interoperability is the future of the idea of the metaverse, although that perhaps is one of the most challenging aspects of this, simply because if I were to start with, say, a game engine, Unreal Engine and Unity and Voxel and Play Canvas don't necessarily speak to one another. They do not seamlessly connect with one another. And so if you're creating an asset that lives in Unreal Engine, and the individual that owns that would like that to enter into a different environment that was built in Unity, somebody has to do the actual work to recreate that asset, rebuild that asset, and transfer it over there. Uh, Perhaps a little bit easier is interoperability between blockchains. We're seeing a lot of that functionality get built today, although obviously there have been a number of compromises in these bridges. So early stage, but progress is being made. You can move assets between Ethereum and Solana quite easily. right? And it's relatively safe. Still work to be done, but at least progress is being made. And then there's kind of the other challenge, which is more on the financial side, economic side, and it's if you're the creator of a world, if you're the creator of an environment, to what benefit do you receive by enabling the inclusion of external assets into that world? Now, we're supportive of the idea, again, given a long enough time horizon, um, but it's already incredibly challenging balancing out, say, gameplay mechanics and functional economy across Star Atlas, just with the asset base that we have in existence today and our plans for assets in the future. If you start to incorporate and include assets from everyone else around the world, well, how do you actually create the balance across those in your existing ecosystem? So that part is actually quite challenging as well. So I do believe it's the future. I think there's a lot of work to be done there still, and I think it's going to be a challenging path forward, but plenty of opportunity with challenge.
That's fantastic. I appreciate you going into depth. So I want to first mention something really exciting for those of you who stuck with us on DappRadar's on our Twitter page. You can see, as promised, that we are revealing some exclusive Star Atlas content never before seen. This is the very, very first time you're seeing it. You can see some development of human faces, skin, hair, and eyes, and some multiplayer character benchmarking. So I just want to say thank you very much for sharing that and for giving our community and for those who are listening kind of a sneak peek behind the scenes here. That's really exciting. So I do want to open it up to some questions. We do only have a couple minutes left, so if you have a question, go ahead and request to speak. What I will say is that I'm going to be pretty ruthless if you don't get to your question quickly. If you are bloviating, you will get cut off. So please get to it, get the question out, and let's rock and roll. All right, guys, your time window to be asking questions is... okay, here we have a question. All right, Rayon, bringing you up on stage. Seems like you're still connecting. If it takes too much longer, we're going to have to go to somebody else and get back to you. Okay, Rayon, we're going to take another question for just a second, then we'll come back to you. All right, let's go with Sutherland. Okay, Sutherland, you can speak. If you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, guys. And thank you, Michael. My question is a simple one. We have seen a lot of traditional financial institutions and even countries like El Salvador adopt, crypto and, all aspects of it. What would you say is the main hurdle for this trend to be adopted in a more massive scale? And why do you think that these financial institutions and countries have actually taken the first steps? Do they do something that others don't, or they know something that others don't, or they have advisors that have taken that extra step of letting them know that there's something that they should jump on early? And thank you again for having me.
Thanks, Llewellyn. Always appreciate your support, by the way, across the community. And great question. Let me maybe just start with the, why countries are, I think, starting to adopt cryptocurrency, at least as a kind of legal form of currency. And it kind of speaks to the comment I was making earlier about, surrounding the sovereign individual and perhaps the decline of the nation state. And I guess what I didn't get to is the idea that countries essentially have a monopoly right now on taxation in any conventional corporate model or business model. If you're a customer of a company and purchasing a product that doesn't meet your expectations, well, you move on, right? You purchase something different, or you buy something that's cheaper if you believe that there's a better value opportunity out there. So the idea that these governments now, via the integration of cryptocurrency as national currencies, or at least accepted in legal currencies, is probably one of the first steps towards this competitive environment that will exist, right? El Salvador is probably looking to for greater levels of immigration into the country, partially because perhaps there's some significant wealth that's been generated throughout crypto ownership over the years, and so you can bring in uh, say like you can get high value individuals into a country, and perhaps innovators and creators that move into a country that then help establish stronger infrastructure and create opportunities and create jobs and create, this is a kind of a positive virtuous feedback cycle and a loop, in that those individuals are actually able to contribute more value in residing in a territory than they are extracting. This is positive for a country that's looking to grow economically. And so what we're seeing with, like, the again, I guess to summarize, with countries that are starting to accept this, is it is them entering into the competitive space for humans, essentially, creating opportunities for other people. So you see them introduce very competitive tax regimes, or no taxes whatsoever, subsidies in some cases, and then also the enablement of things like crypto-based payments. And all of a sudden now there's interest from people who have done well, who have been successful or otherwise, who move into that country. And again, they actually create value. So this is, well, ignore the cat sound in the background there. Uh, I think she was telling me it's 5 o'clock. So in any case, so that's kind of one thing. Now, I think the financial institutions are just starting to get comfortable with with the regulatory state and maturity level of the blockchain industry, of cryptocurrency overall, and we'll continue to see that take place as as much as, like, a lot of people, and to myself to some extent included, the idea of regulation isn't exactly attractive, but at the same time, having regulatory frameworks in place to understand what is legal, what is legitimate, what is possible, how do we escape the gray area and move into that legitimate space, having the legal framework behind that through regulation actually benefits those individuals that are taking those risks, or being the pioneers and being the creators. And so essentially, the financial institutions are starting to get more and more comfortable with the state of industry. And again, we'll continue to do so. Blockchain is technology. We all know, and to some extent, there's certainly the financial component to all of this. And really, by and large, Bitcoin didn't start as necessarily a financial service. Currency and technology, and the ability to eliminate the requirement for trust between individuals to reconcile state of information or state of data. But it's just this progression of the industry, again, that allows for greater levels of comfort from those institutions to get involved. And being that it is uh, new technology, there's clearly opportunity there, and you can just see it by the level of innovation that goes on across the industry overall. Like a company like Automata and a project like Star Atlas wouldn't have existed even 5 years ago, and now it does, right? And that is an opportunity for people to be involved in this, and so. Financial institutions' primary responsibility is capital allocation, and that's how they generate value for their customers. And so they're looking to explore that.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sutherland. I do appreciate your question. Looks like we did have Ryan back up, but seems to not be here. So we're going to move on over to Ali. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and let's get that question in.
Great. Thank you very much for this AMA and for taking my question. And I'll avoid bloviating because I don't want to upset Michael's cat. any further. So I guess to cut to the chase, one thing I've really appreciated is Star Atlas's team seems to be very long-term thinking. There's a lot of statements about multi-generational thinking on the order of 100 years. So Michael, I'm just curious, could you speak to kind of that big picture of what does Star Atlas look like in a generation, in 10 or 100 years? What's the big picture if we take away all the technical constraints and the constraints of today's possibilities?
Thanks, Ali, and my cat thanks you as well. um, no, it's such a great question, and I mean, I think the way that this could unfold is again, it's really just completely up to the imagination. If you were to ask somebody a similar question back in 1990, what the future would look like in say 30 years, I don't think anybody would have gotten it right. So, with that as essentially the preface here, there's virtually zero chance that I get it right, but the point that you are 100% correct on is that we are thinking multi-generational here. The reason why I allude to things like the sovereign individual, again, I've referenced it a couple times, but is the idea that and through decentralized governance, Star Atlas as a product, as an environment, as a digital society will not be fully reliant on automata forever. Won't be reliant on us as a company forever. The idea that we can essentially enable co-creation and co-innovation of the future of this digital world is largely possible because of decentralized governance, because of on-chain mechanics. So what it means is that as a franchise, as a title, as intellectual property, it's not just strictly reliant on us sticking around and building forever. I've sometimes referred to this as kind of the new America moment. Right. So like back when people were first immigrating into America, it was because they were avoiding or escaping oppression of some sort, and they were looking for new opportunities to better themselves. And so this is kind of the world that I think we're entering into, except in the digital space, wherein opportunity is prevalent, and kind of it's entirely incumbent on the individual to create that value and identify that opportunity for themselves. So I don't want to get too far away from maybe the gaming concept, because again, that's kind of the tip of the spear. It is very much our primary focus is building out this incredibly interesting and exciting gaming experience. My personal opinion on it, and the opinions differ across the company, of course, but my personal opinion on it is that it does enable us to create the first components of this civilization, if you will, right? Like people will want to come into the world of Star Atlas simply because it's fun, it's engaging. You can immerse yourself and obtain that sense of escapism that we all look for in playing video games. But once that first society is formed, well, now it actually is kind of law of attraction. It actually is more meaningful for other people to join because other humans are present there. And so what does it look like in say 30 years is really difficult for me to say. I certainly, Automata would not be in the position that it's in. I would think that I'm probably still involved in some way, and many people that are involved in the company today are involved in say the governance aspects, but I would think that this would be incredibly expansive and well beyond anything that we've envisioned for Star Atlas as a gaming product. More specifically, though, perhaps the universe of Star Atlas doesn't change too dramatically, but although that might be an understatement, but really the number of experiences surrounding Star Atlas is probably exponentially higher than I would even possibly imagine. So there's I think it's Gates's law, and I've referenced this before, but humans often overestimate what we can accomplish in 1 year and significantly underestimate what we can accomplish in 10 years, and so extend that out to 30 years. And I would think that the world, the universe of Star Atlas is probably significantly different, but the world around us is also dramatically different. Hopefully
That's a great answer.
Answer the question. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's very cool. Thank you very much.
So we have one other question, and I hope we have time for that. I'm going to bring up Amino, then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Don't want to keep the kitty waiting too long. I know we've gone over time here. Okay, Amino 13, you're up.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate for letting me to ask my question. I have a very simple question. Will we be able to see Star Atlas on any major exchanges like Robinhood, Coinbase, or Binance anytime soon?
Hey, yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, it's difficult for me to respond to that. To be honest, we don't drive any of the decision making on the exchange listings. We are presently available on FTX, which is FTX.com. That is so globally recognized leading exchange. But otherwise, yeah, I'd probably point you to like CoinGecko or CoinMarketCap, and you can see where the tokens are available to be traded.
Awesome. Michael, I appreciate you so much coming on and sharing your very valuable time with us today. Thank you for that, as well as for giving us some awesome content to check out. Just want to give you the floor for any last thoughts that you have, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you again.
No, Ben, I think it was, I really enjoyed the questions. I thought it was a great dialogue here. So I appreciate you and you guys at DappRadar for hosting this for us. As always, a big thank you to our community out there, incredibly supportive. If you are new to Star Atlas or just hearing about this for the first time, I highly encourage you to join us on Discord. Even though we're kind of like early stage in the game, I can tell you that a lot of strategy is being formed right now, and collaborations are being made, and uh, uh, people are thinking through how to engage in the game that's soon to come. So maybe the last comment I'll make is, and I alluded to it slightly, but we are going to be making an announcement very soon about our next 426 live event with some very exciting product releases coming then. And we have quite an exciting end of year still. The team's been working incredibly hard, and we're still full steam ahead. So super exciting time for us. But with that, Ben, yeah, thank you again, and thanks to everyone out there for listening in.
Thank you, everybody. We will see you on the next production from DappRadar. Thank you.